It's my pleasure to rise and speak on the motion in Ms Crozier's name, motion 550. Honestly, I don't think I've heard a more unhinged debate in my short time in here. We've had Mr Tepsborough talking about the state debt will be addressed by the ability of traders to buy coffees. We've got incredible business disruption, but don't worry, tradies are buying coffees. So our $187 billion of debt will be okay. That's productive capital, apparently. And the question I would ask across the chamber is, where do you think this is going to end? Honestly, where do you think this is going to end? Because there is only one way this is going to end. The project is either going to be paused or it's going to implode. You've got the choice. It's either going to implode or you pause it. Make your choice now, because every day that you delay that choice, you're going to cost this state and the next generation more and more and more money. This project has been absurd from the start. It starts with the reckless funding model. The funding model, 30% from the state, 30% from the federal government, 30% from property speculation, aka value capture. Now, we know that the federal government is not going to provide that 30%. That money is not coming. Even the $2 billion set aside has not been delivered and will not be delivered. Infrastructure Minister King has said we're not giving them money until we've seen the business plan. Is the business plan coming? I don't think it is. But most absurd is this value capture model. Now, the whole purpose of value capture is that you get property before it's gone up in value, then tax the hell out of it once it has gone up in value. Well, within Box Hill, the single largest development in the entire SRL precinct project, the vicinity project, has already been contracted in, priced in, and is underway. So at what point does the value capture kick in? Does it kick in now? No. Does it kick in 10 years? No. Does it kick in ever? We don't know, because there is no formula. There is no formula. The minister's not been able to explain what value capture means. And the horse has already bolted, because how much of the values of the properties along the route of the line, including the precincts, has already been priced in. So you've only got two choices at this point. You either intensify the development or you add further taxes. Now, intensifying the development, the government has already got form on this, because when they went to the election twice, there was no mention of high-rise. None. December last year, it's 20 stories. We don't have enough money. Now, in March this year, it's 40 stories. In June this year, it's 50 stories. So they have clearly aimed to intensify the level of development to make up the shortfall in value capture that they have no other means of funding. None. Nothing. The community, including Whitehorse Council, deliberately and purposefully shut out of the entire negotiation process, told from on high that in a council area where they have 74,000 properties, they are required to add 79,000 more within the same footprint. Now, just consider that. That's not providing people choice in accommodation, because the only way you can actually achieve that is to build tower blocks. That's it. They're not aiming for home ownership of young Australians. They're aiming for flat ownership. That's all you're aiming for. You want people in dog boxes so you can fund this fantasy project. And the questions arise, when does the value capture kick in? Does it kick in now? Does it kick in 10 years? When does it go? How are you going to fund this project until it does? How can you? You've got no explanation. So there is no 10 million not available from the feds, 10 billion not available from value capture. There is your own money that you've put us all on the line for, and you continue to sign contracts. And there's a certain level of deceit in all of this, because why in the budgets is the total cost of this listed as to be confirmed? Why in Infrastructure Australia is it listed as to be confirmed? Because $34 billion alone is 10% of the entire Infrastructure Australia budget for the next 10 years. 10% for the whole nation.
How much?
10%. 10%. Extraordinary. There is no business case. And I've got a suspicion why there's no business case, because if they were to present a business case to Infrastructure Australia, they would have to actually come clean and say, this is not going to be 34 billion, it's not going to be 40 billion, it's going to be 50, 60. And there's ample evidence of that. North East Link is a 9-kilometre tunnel. It is presently costing us $26 billion plus for 9 kilometres. Suburban Rail Loop is a 27-kilometre, and it's going to cost allegedly $34 billion. And the Suburban Rail Loop has a much more difficult route to traverse. It has to go through a number of contaminated sites. It has a number of engineering challenges way beyond the North East Link. So the idea that it's at $34 billion is, I think, a ruse. The reason there is no business case being issued, because that would expose the ruse. Now, the other obvious problem with this is the opportunity cost. The opportunity cost of miraculously quarantining $40 billion in an already distressed budget for this purpose and this purpose alone, at the cost of health. And in my electorate, just last night, Box Hill went to code red at 10 p.m. Waiting hours in the emergency department were in excess of 9 hours in the emergency department. In health across it, we've cut cancer treatments, we've cutting billions potentially out of the health service. That is because yet we quarantine this concrete tunnel. People don't get healed in tunnels. People don't get housed in tunnels. They don't get educated in tunnels. As schools, across my electorate, schools with facilities that are long past their economic life, where schools themselves have to fund their own playgrounds. They have to fund portables coming in. Or the parents themselves have to fund the STEM resources and things that are built for the future. Why? Because the Treasurer bizarrely chose to quarantine a concrete tunnel over the lives of people in everyday suburbs. And we are, I think the gravest sin of all is that we are locking this generation's and the next generation's, through debt, this generation's productive capital into a non-productive purpose. This tunnel will not generate wealth. In fact, it will run at a loss because a significant part of the $216 billion cost is operating costs. No one can tell me that fares will make up $60 billion. $6 billion a year in fares. It's a fantasy. And it's only possible when you have a union industrial complex driving economic decisions in Victoria. So we will suffer generational loss, generational productive capital, meaning the wealth of Victoria will decline because we have locked up this capital. And as Mr Limbrick said, in my view, we should get it off our books, we should conduct budget repair, and we should withdraw this, crawl back what capital we can so that we can put it into productive purposes. I can tell you now, though, we're not getting $1 to the dollar, though. We'd be lucky to get 30 cents to the dollar if we sold it off, because this project does not stand up, because if it did, the private sector would be doing it. Now, there's also the other dimension where we can talk at length of how the rest of Victoria is missing out as a consequence of this project. But it is also those communities along the route of it who are missing out as well. The intense overdevelopment, this is extraordinarily bad suburban development concept. Suburban planning, suburban design. It's going to mean 10 years of disruption to businesses who will leave, perhaps never to return. It is, in effect, a concrete noose around the circumference of Melbourne, but cutting a swathe through these suburbs. There's no talk of extra school capacity. There's no talk of extra sewerage or electricity capacity. There's no talk of extra parking or capacity for the 120,000 people are coming, of which 15,000 or more will be children. So all the schools in that area are already at capacity. There's no plan about that. Where does that come into the calculations? Because, as always, people are the last consideration in these areas, the last consideration. Now, the government has a choice. The government has a choice to make a graceful exit or a graceful pause now and save what money we can, or to let this project implode and cost us even more. Now, the graceful exit I put in inverted commas because there are contracts signed, there are going to be liabilities, but everybody knows you do not put good money after bad. Correct. Whatever loss we have to bear, we need to bear it now. And I'm just so glad that everybody over there is on the record supporting this, because these words will come back to haunt you. And I'll make sure they do.